Magic's next set, Murders at Karlov Manor spoiler season, is officially underway, and the set itself features a host of both new and returning mechanics. With so many new and powerful cards, making sure you understand exactly how they work is important, so let's break down all of the mechanics of Murders at Karlov Manor. First off is the Disguise mechanic. Disguise is a variant of Morph, allowing you to play a creature or permanent face down as a 2/2 with Ward 2, and then turn it face up for its Disguise cost. It functions exactly the same as Morph, except the creature face down has Ward 2, so it's still 3 mana to play face down, and then whatever that Disguise cost is to turn it face up. Oftentimes, cards will have effects when you turn them face up, and these are kind of instant speed tricks that can kind of throw your opponents off. They also make attacking and blocking incredibly difficult for your opponent, so they're really fun and limited. To help you differentiate between a mysterious creature and morphs and manifests of the past, there is a helper card in the set that looks like this, and you can put this on top of your face down creatures to represent them as 2/2s with Ward 2. Now, just like Morph, there are a bunch of weird rules surrounding this, and we're going to go over some of the most important ones here. First off, it is always 3 mana to cast a Disguise face down, and when you do so, it is a creature spell on the stack that is colorless with no mana value. On the battlefield, it's still a colorless creature with no mana value that's a 2/2, except now it's actually a creature that can be turned face up at any time. Interestingly, it doesn't use the stack, so it gets around things like Split Second, allowing you to do things when you normally couldn't. You're also not allowed to confuse your opponents using these, so if you have 3 face down creatures, you're not allowed to shuffle them around to make sure your opponents don't know which one is which. You have to make it clear which one's which at all times. And obviously your opponents aren't going to know what the face down creature is, but you can't have the one that ended up on the far left be the one that originally was in the middle to try and confuse your opponents on when they were played in the game. The last major thing is that whenever a disguised creature leaves the battlefield, if it was face down, you must reveal it even if it's going to a hidden zone. This is to ensure that you didn't just put a card that didn't have disguise on the battlefield face down. This also applies to when the game ends, so make sure that if you win or lose or the game ties or whatever, you turn all of your creatures face up so your opponents can see. Otherwise, technically you're breaking the rules. And while there's a million other rules, the last major important one is that when you turn a creature face up, it is still the same creature, so any auras or equipment that are attached to that creature will stay, and it does not trigger enter the battlefield abilities, only abilities that say when this creature is turned face up. And as an expansion of that, if a creature that was disguised turns face up and it was blocking, it is still blocking. If it was tapped, it's still tapped. And if it had counters on it, there are still counters on it. An example of this is Dog Walker, which is a 3/1 for 2, and you can just play it as that. But you can also disguise it face down for 3 mana and then turn it face up for 2 hybrid red-white. And when you do, when it's turned face up, you create 2 tapped 1/1 white dog creature tokens. You get extra value if you play it slowly, and you can throw your opponents off, thinking that maybe the creature only has 2 power, but really it has 3, getting a sneaky kill on one of your opponent's attackers. Now that was a lot, but a lot of it also applies to this next mechanic, which is Cloak. If Disguise is Morph, then Cloak is Manifest. Cloak is something you'll be instructed to do. So for example, you may be instructed to cloak the top card of your library, and if you are, you put it face down on the battlefield, and it's a 2/2 with Ward. That is true whether the card is an instant, a sorcery, a creature, a land, anything, you will put it face down on the battlefield as a 2/2. But if it is a creature, you can turn it face up anytime for its mana cost, allowing you to kind of throw your opponents off with cards that don't actually have Disguise or Morph and flipping them face up. If there happens to be another ability on the card that allows you to turn it face up like Disguise or Morph, you can also pay that cost if it happens to be cheaper. All the rules that apply to Disguises also apply to cloaked cards, so you have to reveal them as they leave zones, and they have to be revealed at the end of the game. They're still the same when they flip face up, and they are a face down creature whether or not the bottom card is a creature or not. An example of this can be found on Atrada, Deadly Fugitive, which is a 3-cost blue and black 1/4 with a couple abilities, but the one we care about is that bottom one that says whenever an assassin you control deals combat damage to an opponent, cloak the top card of that player's library, allowing you to take the top card of that player's library and put it on your side as a 2/2 with Ward 2. It then can be turned face up if it happens to be a creature. And again, Cloak can happen from anywhere, it just has to happen to a card. So it can be a card in a graveyard, in a library, on the battlefield, it can be anywhere. And while those two mechanics were incredibly complicated, the next one is quite a simple one, and actually one that is returning from a past set. It is Investigate. Investigate is a keyword action that just simply says create a clue token. So a card might say whenever you draw a card, create a clue token. Although that card in particular would be quite broken, cards may instruct you to create a clue token for a various number of reasons. If you're not sure what a clue token is, it's an artifact token that lets you pay 2 and sacrifice it to draw a card. So it's kind of like a delayed card draw effect. An example of this is on Novice Inspector, a 1-cost 1/2 that when it enters the battlefield, you investigate. So essentially, you're getting a 1/2 and a clue for 1 mana. It's actually quite good. The next one is a little more complicated and brand new, but it is very flavorful. It is Suspect. Suspect is a keyword action that will have you target a creature, so it'll be written as Suspect Target Creature. If a creature becomes a suspect, it becomes suspected and basically has menace and can't block. There are also a bunch of cards that care about if cards are suspected, like August Cost, who as part of his ability will exile a creature if it's already suspected, and otherwise it will suspect it. It's an interesting mechanic where sometimes you're going to want to target your own stuff to give it menace and make it not be able to block, or sometimes you're going to want to target your opponent's stuff, making it not be able to block, and as a side effect, giving it menace. An important thing to note is that it remains suspected until it either becomes not suspected due to a card saying that, or until it leaves the battlefield. So this is a permanent thing you do have to track, and there are trackers included in occasional packs. The next mechanic is Collect Evidence, which is more of a cost than a mechanic, but you'll see it on a couple different cards. When you collect evidence, you'll collect evidence a certain number. So for example, on Axebane Ferrex, it is Collect Evidence 4. In order to collect Evidence 4, you must exile 4 mana value worth of cards from your graveyard. So that could be 4 1-drops, or a 1/4 drop, or a 3-drop and a 2-drop. You just have to hit at least that number, and you can exile any number, either that number or higher. This can be used for ward costs, or more commonly for extra cost to cast spells. For example, Bite Down on Crime is normally a 4-cost green sorcery that has target creature you control get +2/+0 until end of turn, and then it deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. But as an additional cost to cast the spell, you may collect Evidence 6, and if you do, the spell costs 2 less to cast if evidence was collected. So it's essentially either a 4-cost spell or a 2-cost spell that also requires you to exile some stuff. It kind of reminds me of Delve in that way, except it won't always be a cost thing. For example, V2 Ghazi Inspector is a 2-cost 1/3 that allows you to collect Evidence 6, and when it enters the battlefield, if evidence was collected, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature and you gain 2 life. So here it's always a 2-drop, it just has some extra value if you collected evidence. The final new mechanic is Cases. This is a subtype of enchantment that looks like this. It kind of has the same frame as classes, but with Cases, they're broken up into 3 parts. The top part is an ability that's always active. So for example, on Case of the Filched Falcon, it enters the battlefield and then investigates. Then it'll have a solving condition. For example, on Case of the Filched Falcon, it says you control 3 or more artifacts, which means if the case is unsolved, at the beginning of your end step, if you control 3 or more artifacts, it becomes solved. Once it becomes solved, it permanently stays solved and activates the ability at the bottom. So for example, with this one, it lets you pay 3 mana to sacrifice the case to put 4 +1/+1 counters on a non-creature artifact and turn it into a bird. The point is these are incredibly versatile cards that will vary in what they do. Some might have ETBs, some might have abilities that are active at the top. To solve them might be really hard or really easy, and the ability that you get after solving them can vary wildly. Another example is Case of the Ransacked Lab, which for 3 mana makes it so instants and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Then to solve, you must have cast 4 or more instant and sorcery spells this turn, which is quite difficult. But then whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you get to draw a card once you've solved the case. This is an example of a case that has a pretty solid always active ability, a kind of difficult solve condition, and a very powerful solved ability that you unlock. So those are the major mechanics of Murders at Karlov Manor. However, there are a couple things to note. First off, there are mechanics that only show up once or maybe twice on high rarity cards. For example, Wither shows up on Massacre Girl. This does not mean Wither is a major mechanic of the set, but it's just something they've been doing recently with sets. Second, while we didn't talk about it, Surveil does have a commander precon with this set. It's a deck that cares all about the Surveil mechanic. In case you aren't aware, if you Surveil a number, it means you look at that many cards from the top of your library, and then you can put them back in any order and put any number of them into your graveyard. It's kind of like a graveyard version of Scry, and it's very powerful. So yes, those are the mechanics of Murders at Karlov Manor. I want to know your thoughts on all of it in the comments down below, and if you want to see more content from me now, check out this video where I talk about the true value of serialized cards like the one we're seeing in this set, and check out this video where I talk about 10 of the cards that could have been included in Ravnica Remastered but weren't. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.